Welcome to Wise Move, where we dive into real estate, real life, and real wisdom. I'm your host, Meredith Buckland, a top realtor in the greater Atlanta area with over 12 years of experience. I have had the privilege to help hundreds of clients navigate their moves successfully, while gaining a wealth of wisdom along the way. As Einstein said, wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempt to acquire it. So join me as I connect with clients, colleagues, and industry experts to discuss market trends, share valuable advice, along with real-life stories that can help make every move a wise move. Welcome back to Wise Move. I am your host, Meredith Buckland. I'm here with friend and client Riley Cartwright. And Riley has a background in economics, finance, business administration, and very impressively, he not only double majored, but he got his MBA while he was working and did it with high honors. And so he has a lot of great experience in business and finance. And it was just a great client to work with, and thought it would be fun to connect with him and talk about their journey as they were home sellers with me, and then also purchasing a new construction and all the nuances of that. So Riley, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Appreciate you having me on and appreciate the kind words with the background.
Yeah, well, it's always impressive, especially when people are that, like, they're like double majoring in MBA and they're working. That's not easy. So tell me, Riley, though, your family, tell me a little bit about your family. Although I know I'd love for some of our audience to kind of understand your family and dynamics there.
Yeah, my wife and I were college sweethearts. We met at Florida Southern. I think we started dating our sophomore year. We have officially been married 6 years now. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter. She's really coming into her own now. She's getting her own personality. She loves Disney. We're trying to keep her rooted in old school Disney a little bit with the Disney princesses. So Belle is consistently her favorite. Her top four sort of rotate between Cinderella and Mulan and Jasmine, but Belle is the solid number one, which is good because it's a good movie.
It is good. Yeah. My own granddaughter loves Belle. So she's just turned 3. So Belle seems to be a hit among a favorite among the 3-year-olds, which is great. And yeah, old nostalgic Disney is so fun. And this age is fun. And it really kind of changes the dynamic of your home and life and all that you guys focus on. But back when I first engaged with you guys in that process, you guys were getting ready to sell that first home that you had, and it was a townhome, and you were ready to kind of move to a different direction. But tell me about that decision, about the time of selling your first home and what that was like for you and Caitlin as you came to that decision.
Yeah, I don't think we ever saw ourselves in a townhome to begin with, but when we came into the housing market the first time, it was when COVID was really blowing things out of the water. We both had just graduated, so we didn't necessarily have a nest egg to pull from at the time that we could outbid some other people. But the townhome was really nice, so it was a great place for us to own something and start with some sort of equity before we were ready to move. Once Emmy was born and she was getting into the phase where she was starting to walk, we didn't want a 3-story house anymore. We wanted a place that had some more space, a yard, somewhere a little bit more in suburbia than we were currently at, where things were a little bit slower. So that was the motivation for starting that move.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those criteria there is you have children and having a yard and having a little bit less of a 3-story, more of a level area because they're climbing and all that goes with it. How emotional? Do you remember how emotional was it when you decided to kind of let go of that first home?
I think for us, it was okay because we never really considered it. This is our first home. We lived in several apartments as we moved between college and relocated from Florida to Georgia. And while the townhome was ours, it still had that apartment feel because you were connected to your neighbors. So we weren't as emotionally invested in it. I think when or if the time comes to move from this house, we'll feel more invested in it. It'll be really where we put down most of our roots. Emmy essentially grew up We really get to know our neighbors here. So I think if we ever move from this house, it'll have much more emotional connection.
Yeah, and you hopefully the longevity there in that community. So preparing for the market, if you can think back how that felt, I think we discussed, hey, we're going into a market where they've gone from pretty busy to maybe slowing down some, but we started the process. And how was that experience for you? This was the first home you sold. So what was the pressure points, or how did you go about dealing with that preparation to get it ready for market?
Yeah, we knew that the market was slowing down a little bit when we were starting the process of, okay, we're going to move into the new build. We're going to have to sell. Like it was cooling off a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily an issue to sell. And then right when it came time that we were going to have to put it on the market, I think the Fed jumped interest rates by 2% within the month and everything just came to a halt. I was actually just talking to some people at work about this. They're like, a couple years ago, I feel like you were really stressed during this time. I think that you were selling your house. And I was terrified that we weren't going to be able to sell. The contract on the new house was going to fall through. It was emotionally really tough, but trying to make sure that the house was in the best shape possible every day when you went to work. So when or if that call came that there was a showing or there was some opportunity, you were immediately available and ready to put the house in the best position to sell it. And you can only control within your purview. So just keeping that attitude every day definitely helped to stay consistent and on par.
Yeah, I think when I came in, of course, your home was like you and Caitlin just have an exceptional taste in style and design. So walking into your home for me as an agent just felt like, oh, this is the ideal client. I hardly have to prep them to like, what does it mean to neutralize? What does it mean to have it staged and the ambiance and clean and organized? Because you guys were definitely very top tier in that, which did set you apart and helped as we did professional photographs even, and those groups come in, your home already looks just like a showcase. So that really set it apart for me as going into with you guys. Like I felt like I had very little to prepare you for what to do. I felt like you guys already knew what to do and you were on it. So that was really impressive for you guys. But yeah, we got ready to list your home, and you, which we'll talk about shortly, were under contract on a new construction. So you had a little bit of time, but you had this deposit looming and this need to have a home sold by a certain date, else all of this could just come to a big bad conclusion. And so there was a little bit of pressure there, but we put your home on the market, I remember, and literally 2 days later, like the feds changed the rates and the market just came to a screeching halt. That impacted, there was no movement. So even if you had, I don't even know if you had it listed for $1. I'm just saying nobody was out, nobody was looking. And we had very little showings that week or two that we were on. And that was very, very stressful. I know for you guys to feel that pressure and concern. Did you lose confidence at that point? What was your approach at that moment?
Yeah, actually, they talk about smells having memory. The first day that we were supposed to have a showing that somebody called, we were in the in the kitchen making a seafood boil. So that like aroma of the flavoring packet or whatever was seafood was just throughout the entire house. And I remember you calling, hey, someone wants to come look at the house in 15 minutes. And we were like, oh, good Lord, how are we supposed to get the food off? It's going to smell like the seafood boil in here.
Yeah.
Um, but we turned it off. We got things put away and we just went through a walk with the neighborhood and then they ended up not coming. And then that
Yeah.
was so disheartening. And then I remember it just because I don't think we got a showing at all. I think the only people that came were to the open houses that you had set up. And for us, like you said, we really tried to make sure that it was staged well, that the house was as clean and as perfect condition as possible. So it did feel like what what can I do? I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place with the contract we're in on the new house. And yeah, there was definitely a month that was the case, that it was hard to stay positive for sure. There was a lot of stress. Our in-laws kind of helped us with the interim of the down payment for the new house. So I felt like if we weren't able to sell ours, then they were also going to lose money. So it was a tough place to be in.
Yeah, that was a very challenging, and you were not the only unit for sale at that time either. There was a diagonally from you another unit. And I often will not always recommend hosting open houses just to push you out, because sometimes those are good lead generating open houses can be for an agent, but you don't always get your ready, willing, able buyer who's qualified walking in the door. You just sometimes get neighbors who are looking or other people. But we did. I was trying to do everything I could. I don't even know. There's nobody calling at this time to any homes. I was keeping in touch with the agent across the way. Like, have you had anybody? They hadn't had anybody. Everything just went quiet. And so we did the open house, and client came through, and they also went to the other one, and they were back and forth with ours, and just some funny dynamics there. And then they ended up really showing interest in yours. And I was so excited that at least we had somebody viable. But within that, it took a little bit of time because they were still contemplating, and then their agent wasn't involved. And then they pulled in an agent at last minute, and then their agent was still starting a different business. So it was one-sided, and trying to connect them with the lender that I use a lot so we could see, are they qualified? Because they were questioning, we kind of like it, but we don't know if we can afford it. So we had this buyer, but they're on this spectrum of not even knowing if they can do it, but wanting to do it. So that whole process was such a journey, as you remember, going through that and all that came to be. And so, and interesting dynamics at the end too. Remember, got to the very end, and I was trying to keep the stress load off of you guys of some of the things in the background, but get a call the night before closing that, hey, so the buyers don't have cash to close. And I was like, I cannot have that conversation with Riley. He has I knew you guys had everything on the line, and we were so close. And so trying to figure out with the lender creative ways to offset that and get some ability for that buyer to close. And my instructions to everyone was, no one breathe a word of this to Riley until it's over, because I just wanted you to be able to sleep that night. I figured we could come together to a plan, but I wanted you to be able to like rest. And then we got the next day to the closing, and then it was like, hey, by the way. But at that point, we're relieved, right? Everything is closed, but you certainly had quite a journey as a first-time seller in that regard.
Yeah,
And
it was a tough like situation to be in all the way around. But when we got the house, we were in a market that was just so crazy that people were just throwing money at things. And I don't think, Katie or I expected that was going to happen when we sell it. That was a weird time, but I don't think we expected there to be not a single person wants to come look at this. We lived in an area that's still growing to this day.
yeah.
Like they're putting up new communities all the time. So it's not like we expected there to be absolutely no interest whatsoever. And then that was a very weird, we bought it absolutely the highest of demand you could possibly have, and then ended up selling it the lowest trough you could think of. But yeah, the buyers had some interesting demands or issues through the closing process. Makes it sound like buying and selling a house is like the craziest thing in the world. Hopefully that's not the case for any other house we have, but yeah, that particular situation is a little bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, and you can't anticipate. I always tell people, for me personally, I felt like my husband and I have had a track record of buying high and selling low. And I'm like, but I'm here to help you make a difference in yours. But it's really, some of those areas are out of our control. You start the process and none of us can predict, And even as the market has come even full circle from that point, it still has it's a lot of uncertainty. Buyers are hesitant and rates keep changing, but not significantly down. Or if anything changes in the political front or climate change or anything, the market immediately can freeze and seize up. Trying to prep a buyer and seller for those type of markets can be very challenging. And we go to put it on the market and we get it in the best condition possible. We do the best marketing we can, but then we also have to understand there's some things that are out of our control and how do we navigate all of that. But that was quite a journey for you guys. Any tips that you might have now that you look back for anyone else that's selling their home for the first time and what you guys experienced or what you did that you think made it the difference?
I think one, it's just being consistent in what you can control. We had a little bit of a system to make sure that the house was clean every day. Usually you don't get up and make the bed as perfect as you can do it. We made that part of our morning routine. So we both got up together and make sure that was the thing. Every night we would make sure that all the dishes were in the dishwasher immediately after dinner. You just cooked and ate. You don't necessarily feel like, oh, well, we could put the dishes in there tomorrow. Just making that a habit that you're doing the whole thing the night of, just so visually everything is cleaned. It ultimately didn't take that long. It was more of a mindset change, but it kept us ready if, oh, we're both at work and someone wants to see the house in the middle of the day. We knew, at least in our head, that we were doing everything that we possibly could to be ready when the time came. The second thing is, I would say, as much as we were ready to maybe move into another house, I don't know if we necessarily had like the financial contingency to deal with some of that turmoil at the time. And a lot of people probably don't. But if you have the option, it probably is better to have a little bit more buffer than you think that you might need.
Yeah, and it's sometimes hard to tell, but as you went into you guys were on a journey of a new construction, and so you had started the process. So that train was already in motion. And tell me a little bit about what that was like. So when you guys were considering that next home before you had sold your home, what drew you to that new build type concept? Was it always at the front of your mind, or were you guys just open to anything?
I think we were open to both, but what we didn't want was a house that was 20 years old that nobody had done anything to, and they flipped for two and a half what they paid for it. It's, come on, this house is now worn. I'm going to need to replace all the floors. The cabinets are scuffed up, and you're making more than double what you paid for it. In our head, we just couldn't justify that. So we were fine moving into a house that wasn't a new build, but we wanted it to either be in new condition, at least the areas that made sense. A lot of the houses that had those refurbishments that were available were too expensive, whereas a new build, we could pick and choose what was important to us. We also really like the community that we moved into. The amenities are really nice. We appreciate that it's gated, which at the price point we're at is crazy. So it had some of those things that we liked and we're like, okay, this makes sense for us. They still have new options. And then we priced it out and agreed with the best way to move forward.
Yeah, and new construction that offered you the ability to kind of start that second home. And, because if you went into another home, sometimes people can afford to buy before they've sold, but other people are limited in that. So they need to sell first. And contingencies don't always work these days with sale of home. They want to see that you're free and clear of that. So sometimes that's hard, right? Because you've got to release what you've got and then hope you find what you need, but in a just the right timetable so you don't leave your family homeless too long or living with family too long. So there's a balance in that. So new construction though did offer the chance to kind of start the process, and then partway through they do a sale of home type, but partway through with that heavy deposit, they expect, okay, we want to see this home now under market by this point, but you're already in the build process. And then at that point, though, you're kind of putting it on the line. Your deposit is on the line. The home can go away, of course, and all of that. How nerve-wracking was that for you?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be nearly as nerve-wracking as it was. And then, like you said, once the interest rates took that massive
Mhm.
hike 2 days after we listed and everything came to a halt, it was very much a realization that 7% that we had to put down on the new build was very much in scrutiny on whether or not we were going to be able to move or get that back. So then it was going back and looking to, okay, if we talk to the builder earlier rather than later,
Mhm.
is there a better chance that we maybe could get the 7% back and we could just delist? Is that a safer option? There were a lot of different conversations that we had at the time. We had the ability to live with our in-laws. The goal was to maybe keep out 3 months or less. Knowing what we know now, it might have made more sense to just say, okay, well, we'll just put the house on the market immediately. And if it
Mhm.
sells, we'll live with them for 6 months, but we have the absolute guarantee. However, at the time, interest rates were fine and people were still buying houses. It wasn't crazy, but there was no inkling whatsoever that it would have been an issue. So it's hard to make that decision at the time when you're like, this is the information currently in front of me. So I'm going to make an educated decision. And then all of a sudden, just political
Yeah.
turmoil causes interest rates, whatever. Okay, now, me as the little guy, I'm affected by that, even
Yeah,
though it has
that was
nothing to do with it.
yeah, that's always the challenge, and especially for my clients when they get into these moments and I'm trying to navigate them, I'm also very keenly aware, like, if I don't get this to move or if something doesn't change or shift, it could cost them significantly, even when we're the night before a closing and you've got everything on the line. The pressure's on. Like, you've asked me to help and I need to make sure I get you safely across. So that whole process can be just all time consuming because we want to make sure that we're making the wisest decisions possible. Like, how do we navigate this so that we get you and your family safely to that next home with as much as you can from this one and not lose time? Because if that deal falls through and we're back to square one, we're in this market that would have, in the market we were in at that time, that would have been potentially devastating. But fortunately, that did not happen. And we were able to see it come full circle and close and you guys able to move forward and really finish at that point then some of the exciting parts of this, the new construction and your community, the home that you went into allowed you some customization, that you were able to do. How was that for you? Was that overwhelming or did you feel like, hey, we really enjoy this process and we're up for the challenge of that?
I think my wife and I are both very organized people and we have a relatively similar style. So it was easy for us to come together on what we wanted our potential option to at the least be and look like. One of the hardest parts about that is there isn't necessarily transparent pricing of
Mhm.
options before you go into a new build. You have maybe tiers of, oh, this level. You don't really know what that level is at the time. So that was an interesting concept to play
Mhm.
with. But as far as us wanting to design our own house, yeah, I think it was good because we already had similar style, similar wants in a house. So it was easy for us to go into that together.
How overwhelming was that design appointment for you when you guys went? I mean, because you already have a sense that helped, but it was still the process was still quite detailed. Your hours there, I mean, how many hours did you and Caitlin spend?
Yeah, trying to think back because we went to the preview day. You were allowed a day to go
Mhm.
in and at least look at what the materials were. So you knew what the option was and you could write it down, but you still didn't know the price. And to some degree,
Mhm.
price is important. You have to know how much money you're spending on something. So we tried to spend more time on the preview day than most people do. So we could write down, this is the option we 100% want. This is the option that we would take depending on what goes on. So for everything that we knew of that there was an option, we went through and we had, this is our favorite. This is what we would take if necessary. So, oh, this is the level 5 and this is the level 2. And then when it came time to the actual day, we had all of that written down and we went in at the very beginning and said, we want you to put everything to the top tier of what we want. And then we started there and started highlighting maybe the more expensive items and said, okay, if we get rid of this one expensive item, we can have 5 of our less expensive things. So it was relatively easy to just start knowing exactly what we wanted and then already have some contingency options for other things on what we could be okay with. So it was long, but being organized and prepared made it easier.
Yeah, you guys are extremely organized. So again, I mean, that just spoke to me like all the way through watching you guys, how you handled your home prep, the condition it was in when we got ready to list, how you handled even preparation to purchase and bill. And you took careful time. And I know it speaks of you personally and Caitlin personally, but there were times even in the early stages of that build where you were still like, I'm not comfortable moving forward unless, this or this is in place or going to happen, especially with the pricing, because there were just some things that you were not willing to put your family finances at risk for just for that home. So that's like always a hard time to sometimes make that decision because you're invested in a new home purchase and it can be start to get emotional and you can get carried away with we started here and now we're here and what does that look like? But having some of that balanced approach to it in a very emotional time to still say, hey, I'm still looking at this cautiously. I'm not just getting all emotional about this and the sky's the limit. I'm still going to kind of rein this in within that, which was hard, I'm sure.
I remember the day that we came over here and did the are we going to do this or not? And we priced it out with the sales counselor, and you were over here. I actually brought my laptop, which I keep a very detailed budget on to figure out what this would cost. Because a lot of times you go into a community and it's 400 plus, or this model is 450. They're like, okay, so maybe you add some additions into it and it's 480. That's not really the truth. You're putting 75 to 100, depending on how big the house is, maybe a little bit more. And, for us, I wouldn't even consider that like super high end finishes. Maybe that's like a 7 out of 10. There's a bunch more things that we could have added or that we wanted to add, but elected not to. Keeping the budget and having we absolutely cannot spend any more money than this. Is this an actually feasible decision? And I remember Katie and I talking, and we felt bad because we were there after hours with both you and the sales counselor. We don't want to have wasted someone's time, but we also don't want to lock in a decision that's going to negatively affect us forever and ruin our credit. And it is an emotional time, but being able to pull back and have some sort of objective thing that you can look back on it makes it an easier decision or a little bit more justified decision.
Yeah, it is just the smart way to do it. But it oftentimes we can get into those moments and the pressure feels on and then we are like, okay, we'll just figure it out later. And then and it's hard because not every build is like this, but some builds are totally custom and you have no price point to start with. Sky's the limit. Others are just pretty clear forward. The builders are track builders. They do pretty much the same things. You might have a color preference, but here's the price. But yours was a little bit open-ended on that customization and the pricing was not as clear, straightforward as it could have been in other situations, but you being able to pull back for a moment at that decision, that table and go, I just need to think about this. I need to very clearly think about where we are, where I need to be, all of that. I think on your part and Caitlin's, the ability to do that and to put that discipline in place was very important for your family. And I think it's a good way to approach any home buying decision is because it's really easy to get caught up in the emotions at that time. And especially as some couples or individuals have had to go through buying during a high bid process. You can see even in those moments how you can lose all rationale. I just need it. And all of a sudden you're bidding up higher than you ever intended to be or should have been comfortably to be able to still manage your goals on the other side. That was still I think a great decision on your part to really make sure within that. But I also I wonder, as you look back on that build, like what were you and Katie the must-haves as you approached, like this house must have these items? What was important to you?
We definitely wanted an updated kitchen. That's also something that I would not have been able to do on my own. So we wanted an updated kitchen and a nice living area. We wanted reasonably nice bathrooms. Katie had never had a bathtub before. She wanted a bathtub that she would be able to take baths in. We wanted a relatively neutral palette, but a little bit more warm tone than maybe it had been the last couple of years. Felt like we were on the early adoption of getting out of millennial gray, trying to get slightly more warm tone, but
Yeah.
still keep it neutral. And we wanted solid curb appeal.
Mm.
So the things that would make us feel good about our house outside, people are going to look at it and say, oh, that's a nice house. People come over and they're like, oh, this is a nice kitchen. Also something that makes us enjoy our house. When we get home at the end of the day, you take a deep breath. Oh, I live here. I'm proud of this. Some of the other things that we could have done on our own, like my office, I came in here and did this myself after we moved in. So a lot of maybe the more detailed work or some of the walls. I put a fireplace in our bedroom. Some of that I knew that I could do on my own. So maybe prioritizing, we don't have to add this right now because I can do it. So taking that into consideration in design day helped too.
Yeah, I think those are very important considerations. And now that you've been in the home and you've gone through the whole new construction process and you're maybe giving advice to other people, what would you tell them? Like, hey, make sure when you're in the building phase process, focus on these areas. Like these are important to have with the build. And then these other areas, like you said, there's some areas that can be added later. But what would you encourage people though in that new construction to consider as being part of the, hey, do it now because you might not be able to do it later or as cost effective?
I think that you have to focus on the areas that in general there's going to be return on value.
Hmm.
If you ever had to sell this house, is spending whatever money you spend on this going to be worth it? And kitchens and bathrooms are usually that one thing. Maybe after that, what type of flooring you put in, but all flooring is going to decrease over time with wear. Doing all of the tile, making sure that you have a solid scheme for the house,
Hmm.
making sure it's consistent, I think is important. Otherwise, it just look mismatched. And the outside, I think, is super important. If someone looks at your house, do they think it's gonna look nice on the inside? And if they don't think that, do they even want to walk in the front door? And you're not building your house for other people, but I do think that you have to take into consideration if you're not going to live there your entire life, you have to have some understanding of when I sell this, did I make good decisions when I bought it or put it together?
Right. It can't be so personal to the point that everyone else is like, I'm not into that motif or design, or it's so out of character for that home and that community that it becomes this anomaly that doesn't quite work on resale within that. So now that you've been in your home, what are some of the things that you absolutely love that you guys did?
Some of the decisions that we made when building the house, we absolutely love. We upgraded our cabinets about as much as you could possibly upgrade them. And they have full size pull out drawers, which is huge. It's super easy to get all your pots and pans out of your drawers. They look super nice. They're soft closed. I think for the price, I think the upgraded kitchen package that did all that, it was super worth the utility that it gives, and it has a high end feel. We got full face doors on all of our cabinets, which makes them look larger and
Yeah.
they cost a little bit more. Visually, it looks better. They have a nice beveling to them, so they have a kind of an architectural detail. So I really like that we did that with our cabinets. We got as big of a back patio as we could possibly get. The goal was to cover that. We ended up doing something different in the backyard and built a separate sunroom, but getting the concrete patio poured with the builder was so much cheaper than waiting afterwards, and it gave us the biggest seating area that we could have outside. Investing in a really nice backsplash in the kitchen, I think,
Mm.
helped set it apart. Overall, it was a relatively limited expense, but it highlights the area and it gives a nice appeal that it otherwise would not have had if you just spent a couple $100 less.
Right.
Just being mindful of where you're spending money and is it looks, is it value, kind of what are you getting out of it?
Yeah, that's sometimes it's hard to balance it all. Like when you've got 100 decisions to make on this home. Okay, where am I at on all of this? Because you can get lost in that. Do you think you'd build again?
Yeah, I definitely think that we would build again. I don't know if we do semi-custom, which is what this one was, or we try and do full custom. I think we definitely would focus if we ever moved on being in a similar community to where we
Mhm.
are now. We really enjoy how big the clubhouse is. We've met a lot of friends in the community. My daughter's best friend lives in our community. We can see her all the time. So someplace that's gonna have a lot of younger families or similar age families to whatever we are at the time, that we're gonna meet friends and enjoy being in our community and with our neighbors and doing things. It's really a breath of fresh air. So
Yeah.
as much as the house is important, I think where it's at is also
Mhm.
super important.
Yeah, and building that community, that whole quality of life in not just in that home, but in that where it is situated and your friends that's now surround you. And of course, you have family that have moved in. So all of that just makes that quality of life and that home just a little bit more upper level than it would have been just not having a community like you do and being so grounded in that. So I love that you guys were able to find that in that community and that it worked for your family, that you had the gates, that you had the amenities, the everything that kind of came with that process still allowed you to have a really good family home to grow and to expand and to enjoy for so many years. As you think of others that are heading into the process of, hey, we're in our first home and we're thinking of selling, thinking of building, any advice that you would give them or tell them or something you wish you knew within that? And how important was it to even have an agent? I mean, a lot of times people think, "Hey, I can go through this and do it on my own to some level." And that's kind of throwing myself out there, but how important was that even to this? And what would you tell somebody else as they're looking forward?
I think one of the things is you need to formulate whatever your worst case scenarios are financially with, what's the worst case of what my house was going to sell for? And you
Mm,
need to be realistic about that. And if it is the worst case scenario, can you deal with that?
mhm.
When you are buying a house, especially if it's a new build, what's the worst case on what I can spend? Especially if you don't necessarily know what that price may be when you enter into the contract. How much can I actually do? And is that a realistic understanding on how nice I want my house to be? Because if it doesn't work financially, it is going to ruin the house for you. So I think having that conversation early and truly being honest with yourself about what that worst case on both sides is going to look like is important. Asking, I think, questions about the current HOA or the builder is important. I think that's one of the things that you maybe overlook, especially in a newer community. You're looking at the house, you're looking at the amenities. Are you looking at, does this builder have a good reputation? Is there potential litigation in the neighborhood, or does this builder have litigation in other communities near this? That kind of goes in par with the subcontractors that they're using, the overall quality that you're going to have. So thinking about those kind of things too, I think is important. Having a agent was really helpful in this particular process. We absolutely would have probably lost a ridiculous amount of money. We did not have you helping us through this process, especially closing got pushed for 2 days already because of some sort of weird banking thing that they had to clear a second form. And then during that, they didn't have the cash to close, and you were able to work that out for us. You also did multiple open houses to make sure that like we were doing everything we could to try and solicit people inside. And I couldn't imagine having to deal with that on my own. The interesting thing about agents from either a buyer or seller's perspective is I feel like no matter what, one of the agents maybe doesn't deserve whatever they get out of it. If the seller's market, then the seller's agent probably doesn't deserve whatever they're getting because the buyers are just throwing money at them and vice versa. So that is an interesting catch 22 of that is maybe only one half of the equation, and maybe they should get more than the other half depending on what market you're in as opposed to splitting it. But yeah, we absolutely would not be sitting here in the position that we're in today without having an agent, you specifically.
It is such a big trust factor when a client gives their largest investment and puts it into the hands of a resource, and they hope that they can trust that resource and that that resource is going to bring them the best information and protect them along the way. And as you go through it, and as you saw, there sometimes are ones that are like that and others that are certainly not ever present or not really doing their part. And so it does make it hard to, we should vote about this at the end, which one gets compensated or not. But in the end, I think there's so much, like you said, in an already emotional moment to navigate and understand all the contract. What am I protected in? What's the next best resource for this situation? And how do I handle and maneuver all this on top of some other decisions in life and work and everything that's going on? And what don't I know that I don't know? And, navigating and not having those phone calls, like where you're getting the phone call, finding out we're not going to close and you don't have any resource to figure out, can I solve this? How do we how do we figure this out? So having a trusted resource can be very, very valuable, but having someone like your family trust me to step in and take that on is something that it's like a high honor. And so I take it very seriously. If you ask me to help you guys and protect it, I'm going to dig my teeth in and hold it till the end and really want to see you get across, because it's a relationship for me to know too that when the Cartwrights are going to sell again, they're not like, who do we use? We're not using that one again. I want you to come back and I want to see your family grow, and I want to see that investment grow and to know that I've done everything you've asked me to do. So it was such an honor to work with you guys, and you were certainly exceptional clients too. Like I said, you did your homework. I think some of the key steps and takeaway, even from what you talked about, is to be prepared, like keep your home in ready condition. And then when you go forward in this, also make sure your budget is aligned with where you need to be and stay steady in that. Don't get so emotional that you're overspending or overdoing an area that could be detrimental to your family. So it's a whole process that you kind of both sides benefit from. And I certainly benefited from watching you guys go through it, and was a privilege to do that. So now that you guys are in, what are the next steps for the Cartwright family in the immediate future? Are you just all done with the house, or do you have more that you are working on, and what's ahead for you guys?
Oh, goodness. I tried to do as much in the house as I possibly could in the first year we lived here because even though it was difficult to continually do project after project, if it took me years to do it, then I didn't get to enjoy them for the years that they weren't done. I've really pushed myself as hard as I could to do all kinds of things throughout the house in the first year. In my office that you see here, I put a butler's pantry in. So we have a nice drink fridge and much better storage for the pantry. I put a fireplace in our bedroom and did really nice molding up there, repainted the whole thing. I put a sunroom in the backyard. There's a lot of other things that I've done with the walls around to make some accents here and there. I think my next big project is I'm going to put a golf simulator in the garage.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, little
Yeah.
bit of recreational use with that. But I tried to do most of the big things that we wanted sooner rather than later. That way I felt like the house was for the most part done the way we wanted and we got to enjoy it for as long as we're here.
Yeah. I love that. I need to come by and see your home. It's been a little bit since I've been out there, and now that you're settled in, love to come see it, and just love that you were able to share a little bit of your journey. Like most people, as they're approaching something as daunting as even a build and sell, it can be overwhelming, but you've had great advice and great steps towards that. So definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and what you've gained through this process. And as you look forward, what you'll know to take into the next phase of that journey, should you proceed with a new build or another sale, once you caught your breath from this one. But this has been so great. I do appreciate you guys contributing both to using me as your agent, but then also to just helping other buyers and sellers be better prepared.
Yeah, of course. Really appreciate you having us on today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Riley. And thanks to everyone else for joining us on today's episode.
Thank you for tuning in to Wise Move. I hope today's episode provided you with the tools and insights you need to confidently navigate your real estate, community, and life journey. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and please share this podcast with friends and family who are making their own moves. Stay connected for more real estate insights, and remember, every great move starts with a wise move.